You may be seated. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. So I've seen a number of Jewish comedians that when they want to make fun of rabbis and the sermon, they say, every rabbi starts with, in this week's Torah portion we learn. So I was thinking about that. So this is what I came up with. In this week's Torah portion we learn the story. I couldn't come up with anything else, I'm going to be honest. I just thought we could just go straight to it. So in the Torah portion this week, it really talks about the beginning of what would become the Jewish people. Abraham and Sarah are not the first Jews. They wouldn't have understood what you were saying if you'd asked them, are you Jewish? They wouldn't have known. Even if it was a kid asking them to wrap tefillin, they wouldn't have known, because the word Jew is probably maybe a 1,000 years later, 1,500 years later. It's after the tribe of Judah, Abraham's great-grandson, who he never met. But Abraham and Sarah are at the beginning of what would become the Jewish people. And I talked a little bit at the Torah intro that they were very unlikely in terms of their age and all that, becoming the beginnings of a new people. Again, they'd been married for decades and decades, never had children, no reason to think that they were going to start. By the way, it's no longer news for guys around 100 to have a kid. It's a little cringy. So the 100-year-old guy having the kid, not news. The 90-year-old woman having the kid still gets our attention. But I was wondering, why did they have to leave where they were? Why did they have to go to the land of Canaan? They could have just stayed. If the idea was to become a great nation, to spread the message of God caring about all of humanity, why couldn't they just stay where they were? They were in a fairly large metropolitan area. They could have spread the word there, so to speak. And Abraham already knew the language. He knew the culture. He could have had an impact. So why does God move them to another country altogether, allegedly filled with people who would become our enemies? Right, the Canaanites, we're told later, become very vicious enemies. You have the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Edomites, but I'm sure there were plenty of ites where he was. Why did he have to go? And I was reading an interesting commentary from Ramban, from Nachmanides, who sort of wrestled with the same idea, is that what Nachmanides Ramban says is that God told Abraham and Sarah to go to the land of Canaan because at least some of the Canaanites there would listen to him. So where he was, no one was going to listen to him. But in the land of Canaan, there was a possibility that the Canaanites, at least some of them, would listen to the message that Abraham and Sarah had about God being concerned with humanity, of God wanting us to treat each other appropriately, to not just care only about ourselves. And we see that's how Abraham and Sarah lived their lives. They put their tent, which is open in all directions for people who are lost, to have food and shelter and words of comfort. Almost all the people going through there were probably these Canaanites. These were the people who who become enemies. But what I want to flag, and what is really important, is that not all of them were enemies. Avram and Sarah make a big impact on some of them, and they join Abraham and Sarah. Whether they actually go with them or they adapt their ideologies of some compassion, of looking out for other people, about God's concern for others. Now again, most of the Canaanites are the enemy. But that word most is important. Some of them become part of us. They either join the people, they become allies, they find a different path. And I think that this is important for us to remember now because it feels like we have so many enemies. And if your ideology is more on the right, you believe it's all coming from the left. If your ideology is toward the left, you believe it's all coming from the right. And by the way, you're both wrong. It's coming from a lot of directions at once. If you take a stand against only one, you're promoting that one. There has to be a way where we're flagging all of it, that hatred on any side isn't going to work. That's the message of Avram and Sarah. We have a lot of enemies, but they're not all enemies. Avram and Sarah were able to transform even a small number into people who would join us, people who would be allies, and that has sustained us for thousands of years. What I am suggesting is that we don't give up, that even within our enemies, there are people who can be our allies if we give them a chance, if we don't demonize every single one of them for not agreeing with everything that we say. Again, it's a scary world, and there's a lot at stake, and we have real enemies. But you don't fight your enemy by making more enemies. You fight your enemy by making more allies, more friends. And it is frustrating and it is painful, and 99% of the time it is an absolute failure and it doesn't work. But that 1% that it does work is the difference. I don't want us to give up on Abraham and Sarah's spirit, because that's why we're here today. Again, most of our enemies are going to stay enemies. Most of our enemies are going to be dangerous. But there is a way of transforming people. And it's not through hate. It's not through demonization. It's through a sense of we believe that all people are entitled to dignity, humanity, a basic standard of living. That is the core of who we are as a people, and there's no point in being a people otherwise. Why would we do this otherwise? Certainly it's not to make friends. It's not for feeling safer in the world. It's not for feeling more rooted. We do this because we are the difference between the world being a place of compassion or the world being a place of cruelty. And as soon as we permit it to be the place of cruelty, the bad guys win. We become them. But when we say we will look at everyone as a possible ally, as a possible compassionate person, knowing that most of it will be failure. I'm under no illusions. Most of it will be failure, but that 1% of success will make all the difference in the world. Shabbat Shalom.